All right, it's a fun throwback day on the Endless Hustle as I've got former child star turned successful actor and now the legacy sequel to Turner and Hooch, Josh Peck, man. Great to have you on the show.
Oh man, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what's it like being Tom Hanks' son? That's my first question.
It's an honor, to share any sort of genetic coding with the greatest actor alive. It's a great honor, and I hope that if we do get a season two, I mean, granted, if you've seen the trailer for Turner and Hooch, you know that sadly my father has passed away on the show. But if Mr. Hanks wants to do anything on the show, we'll do a whole flashback season. We'll shoot in 2002. I can pass for 16. I think we'll be fine.
By the way, Tom's aging pretty well himself, so something tells me he could pass for young Tom Hanks as well.
The handsome man.
So getting this, it gets pitched to you, I'm assuming. They're like, let's redo Turner and Hooch. You're going to play the son. Dad's passed away. This has got to be an automatic yes, I feel like, because this movie meant so much to so many. Is it an automatic yes?
I think you're right that it's an automatic yes. I mean, for me, coming from sort of the kids' television world and making stuff for families, I'd spent sort of the last 10 years trying a bunch of things and getting to really stretch as an actor. But inevitably, I wanted to find that next thing that appealed to that audience, but felt like it was elevated and something slightly different. So when this came around and it was an opportunity to do like really broad comedy, the cool action adventure stuff, and some of like the romantic drama stuff too, it just felt like a slam dunk.
And by the way, Disney Plus, I mean, they're knocking everything out of the park. Every Marvel series is redefining the genre. Now you guys, I mean, it's incredible to see what they're doing on the streaming side because Netflix obviously starts it. Amazon's now running with it. But I feel like Disney Plus is essentially taking their movie studio muscles and thrown it on television. It's absolutely incredible.
I think that's a great observation. You're so right. I mean, yeah, you have people like Amazon and Netflix who absolutely crush it. And I think where Disney Plus was really smart was they sort of saw that the co-viewing experience, something that an entire family could sit down and enjoy, there was sort of a gap in the market there. There wasn't one studio pumping out a lot of content for that. And to know that like most families, when they sit down and watch something, someone's compromising. It's either little brother or dad or grandma. But to know that like this show, if you're into the procedural action adventure, who's the new bad guy of the week, we got that covered. You want a love triangle, you want rom-com, we have that. Cute dogs, physical comedy, done. It's just something that everyone can enjoy.
So let's talk about where the show takes us. You obviously had mentioned, and we've already talked about, you play the son of the now deceased Scott Turner, Detective Scott Turner. Where do we see him go from here?
Basically, when we meet my character, Scott Turner Jr., he's like this very focused, linear, career-driven guy. His apartment is psychotically clean. His best friend's a Roomba. And he's just like living this small little life, no time for a relationship or what have you. He just wants to be on the straight and narrow. And about 10 minutes into the pilot, he gets gifted this 150-pound French Mastiff who completely sort of uproots his life, makes a mess of everything, and somehow kind of is great at solving crimes. So all of a sudden he gets the partner that he never wanted, but might have always needed.
I want to rewind the clock. And obviously we joked around child star, but it's true. You were part of a phenomenon with Drake and Josh. And it made me think, I don't know if you got a chance to see, but recently Soleil Moonfry had this incredible documentary called Kid 90. And it was fascinating because we get a look into what it's like being in young Hollywood during that time. And what struck me is young Hollywood, they're just like us. I mean, there was friendships. So for you experienced fame, Disney fame at such a young age. How are you processing it at that point? And you seem like such a normal dude. How do you continue to stay normal in the face of fame?
I think, well, thank you. It's funny. I heard about the documentary. I heard her interviewed on the Victory podcast. And
Me too.
And you're right. It was fascinating. And I think, that sort of generation was like sort of 90s kids. And then for me, it was the 2000s kids. And it was very similar in that way. I mean, look, I have a very wonderfully domineering Jewish mother who, if I ever went off the edge too much, she was like, "What are you, nuts? What do you think, you're a big deal? Like, trust me, like I will son you, no problem, whether you're 16 or 25." And I got really lucky in the sense of I for sure had a moment between 17 and 21 where I was sowing my wild oats, thinking I was the cool guy at the club in Hollywood. But the reality is that I got into acting because it was an escape for me. It was my passion from as far back as I can remember when I started doing it at 10. And that's never changed. And I sit here at 34, constantly wanting to be challenged, wanting to do hopefully good work and wanting to continue to create content. So I think that's been my saving grace. It never was about the billboard or the great table at the restaurant for me. It was just about doing the work.
By the way, that Soleil interview on Victory was amazing because as someone who grew up, I'm a little older, I'm 43, but I could connect with everything she was talking about. It was incredible.
I mean, just a big fan of that pod in general. And I think that it was really, I thought it was a great take, and it was wonderfully measured, right? She didn't seem like disillusioned or cynical, but you also felt like it was a really honest take on it.
So you begin to transition out of being a child star. And I remember talking to David Faustino years ago, and obviously he had Bud Bundy and Married the Children was so groundbreaking, but he had a real problem getting into auditions and people not seeing him as Bud Bundy anymore. Did you have that same issue, or was it refreshing to get out of it and you're like, I want to get in the audition room, I'm going to pound it, whatever it takes?
I think that there's always going to be that challenge where people marry themselves to the image that they first had of you when they were first introduced. And when they first fall in love with you, that's who they fall in love with. And my situation was specific because what many people fell in love with was like this 280-pound 16-year-old kid with a high voice. And I kind of took that guy away from them because I lost a lot of weight and I grew up, and I wanted to slightly be this other person, still very much who I've always been, but with this new sort of look and this new thing. I think where I was incredibly lucky, though, is I faced a lot of those challenges, preconceived notions. People think they know who you are and you're only capable of this one thing. But I always could get in the room. And that's all I wanted, was like, I understand that it's an uphill battle. I know that with this early success will come challenge. But if I can have the opportunity to fight for the role and show that hopefully I'm the right guy for it, if at the very least I can do that, then I'm pleased. And that's what I've always had. And I've never been afraid of getting in there and facing that rejection. But, every now and then you get a win.
It's funny because I just had Sanaa Lathan on the show today earlier. And here's an incredible actress, incredible success, part of so many iconic and groundbreaking projects. And like every actor I always talk to, there's the mindset, oh my God, am I going to get a job tomorrow? And it just stays with you. Probably Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise probably feel that way. But is that something that you have to grapple with? And we talked with her about learning to love the word no. Do you become immune to it, and do you begin to embrace like loving the word no?
Yeah, I've been so lucky because over the last 8 years, I've sort of diversified and started becoming sort of a YouTube content creator and social media. And I built this whole other business where I was no longer contingent on sort of the gatekeepers and at their mercy. And that was great because it was revelatory, because so few actors are afforded that opportunity to be able to make money doing something else. That was very much it's very much part of the business, but it's different than the way that I was trained and grew up. But for me, you're so right. Even though I had that freedom of knowing that I didn't need the job to sustain my livelihood or take care of my family, it still hurts. And when something doesn't work out, you're like, oh, it feels so personal. But you're right. You do have to fall in love with the word no. And you have to stay within the realm of what you control, which is preparing, having to take on a character, and not just trying to do the part in the way that you believe they want to see it, because that's something else I've learned. And maybe I'm sure you've auditioned or you've interviewed people, Arthur, who've spoken about this. So rarely do they know what they want. They want you to solve the problem. They want the actor to come in and be like, this is what you need. And again, sometimes it really happens, and most of the time it doesn't.
And by the way, I had no idea. I'm prepping for this interview. And again, I'm 43. So the Vlog Squad, this whole generation of shit, I have no idea about. I knew who David Dobrik was and that the whole community had built, but I had no idea that you were doing that YouTube stuff and had a YouTube series. When you start doing that stuff, was there fear at any point that I may not get taken seriously as an actor now because I am participating in the digital revolution with these kids?
Sure. Early on, I mean, I started doing it in 2013, and anything that's new, I wonder if, when TV was created, if radio stars were like, I'm not going to slum it in the pictures. Like, this is the ultimate medium. Who knows, but I just knew that I loved creating content. I loved having the opportunity to be creative. And for my whole life, I had been beholden to a producer giving me a gig and having everything to come together and waiting 18 months for something to come out. And this was like, if you have an idea and you shoot it, you could upload it the same day and get a reaction. And then eventually, and pretty quickly, businesses, major corporations started sponsoring these videos, and they came calling, and all of a sudden you're like, there's something here. So while it was sort of a leap of faith, you always had sort of like that whisper in your ear going like, no, this seems to be trending upwards.
Yeah. And I think you realize that you're now an entrepreneur as much as you are an actor. And that's the world that we live in, by the way. Now look at Addison Rae, who the biggest star on TikTok, who's now has a remake of She's All That, the remake of and it's like incredible.
Yeah. I mean, Addison, people like that, I just don't know if there's going to be a big distinction anymore. And then conversely, you watch like people like, The Rock or Kevin Hart, who have 100 million plus followers on Instagram. Like that's power. And I don't think they would give that side up for a second. It goes hand in hand.
And by the way, you're no slouch yourself. You have like 15 or something. Another thing that blew me away, I'm like, Josh Peck has like 15 freaking million on social media, whatever the number is. How crazy is that when you look at your phone and you can put up a picture and 11 million people, depending on what the algorithm is doing that day, can connect to you instantaneously like that?
It's powerful, and it makes you it makes you pause before you give anything to your audience, and to make sure that it's something that you want to share with that many people. And having grown up in the business from as far back as I have, I think for the most part, and we're all, we all fall short sometimes. I try not to say or do anything publicly that I wouldn't want on like the Jumbotron at Madison Square Garden, but I think I really try to walk that line and be careful of what I'm showing, whether it's my son and my family life, whether it's a joke. You just have to be really careful because you don't want to be misinterpreted and you don't want to do anything to offend.
How crazy is that when you look back on young Josh Peck, the kid who's starting out in the business, to now veteran actor Josh Peck? What would veteran actor Josh Peck tell young Josh Peck about the lessons that he's learned, the experiences that he's had?
I'd probably tell young Josh Peck to not have thirds. Maybe just seconds is enough. I was a very overweight kid. I think it's so trite, but we always tell ourselves that we would tell our younger self not to worry so much, But I think that's it's sort of a cop out, right? Because I have the hindsight of knowing that it worked out, right? I'm living in today, but you don't know that at 14 or 19 or 25, right? And so much of the last 20 years of my life, being 34, I have been, having these sort of like, my life's been like the stock market where it goes up and down on any given day, but it tends to trend up. So what I would say is like, you can do it in any way you want. You can worry every second, you can enjoy every second, like just do the work, be a good guy, and let a good life be the result of good living.
When you experience that type of success so early, does it spoil you to a certain degree? Does it make you immune to feeling like, shit, I'm never going to fail? Look, I'm 1 for 1, 2 for 2. Is that the feeling, or is there still the feeling of what's happening next?
I think when I remember distinctly like being, in my early 30s and having a little bit of a quarter life crisis, wondering, what's next in my life? And my life was so great. I had a little baby and my wife, and, I was doing well in social media, and I was making good money, but I was like, is it acting? Is it social? Is it something completely different? And, my buddy, I called him and he said, you can't judge your life today against the success you had as a kid, because it was an anomaly. It makes no sense. Like, who has that much success and prestige at that age? He's like, if you're 32 and you're wondering what the hell you're going to do with your life, it sounds like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So don't judge it.
What a great piece of advice, by the way.
Yeah. Totally. But I'm guilty of that. I spent a lot of my life judging my past success and where I was at in that moment. And it always left me feeling less than.
As these fans have grown up with you, as you've grown up, what's the feedback been? Are they still as connected? Do they still share the stories of how a piece of art that you created left an indelible impact on them?
I think the special thing, when we were shooting Drake and Josh, it was a show for tweens, really, and there was no social media, and so it wasn't the phenomenon that it became later. And I believe that it had the same power because it was a very universal idea, right? It was a family show, like all the great, family sitcoms that we grew up with. It just was about interpersonal dynamics between brothers, between an evil little sister, between a dopey dad. Everyone could identify. So while I think the show was really well done, it benefited from the fact that, it aged well. And so it affected new generations. And 15 years later, that the last time I think we filmed an episode, I was 19. It's gained this new audience, and 12-year-old kids come up to me today and they're like, we love the show. So it's a pretty wild, it's a pretty wild thing. It means a lot that we created something that meant so much to so many.
You got to work with one of the top 5 coolest dudes on the planet, John Stamos. If there's a Mount Rushmore of coolness, that dude's somewhere on it, because it's like him, Brad Pitt, and there's a couple others, but they're the dudes that they enter the room, perfect hair, perfect skin, Greek god, good looks, and they've got the personality to match. You're just like, I hate you, dude. You're too perfect. But what was Stamos like behind the scenes? What was it like working with him?
Stamos lives up to everything you've ever imagined of him so well that you're right. It's not fair. It's like, I would say, like, if we're all God's children, like, John Stamos is his favorite. He is a consummate professional. Let's talk about a guy who's obsessed with the work. He's I can't believe that 5 years later we've actually become really good friends. Our life kind of had a similar trajectory. We both got married within a year of each other. We both had little boys within a year of each other, and he's just been a great friend. And funny story is, the only time I've met Tom Hanks was at John Stamos' birthday party when we were filming the show. He was nice enough to invite me to his birthday, and Tom Hanks is there. I'm like, of course Tom Hanks is at John Stamos' birthday party. Like, my uncle Rick is at my birthday party. And I remember specifically that Tom Hanks came up to me and my girlfriend, who's on my wife, Paige, and introduced himself. And I was like, what a classy move to know that, like, perhaps I might be a little intimidated to go over and be like, my man, put it there. And he was sweet enough to be like, hey, I'm Tom, nice to meet you. And I was like, yes, I know.
Yeah, you're not even like, I'm Josh. I know. Bow down. Does he know who you are, though? When he comes up, does he know are you the Drake and Josh kid to him?
I don't think so. I don't know, but then again, I think he has like kids my age and my wife's age. So he just kind of felt like once 5 seconds went by and the excitement wears off, you're like, oh, you're a dad. You're just like a nice dude, and it just felt super comfortable.
How does that change you, by the way? You talked earlier about how doing Turner and Hooch and being a dad and now trying to make art that's more family specific. Is that now factored into the projects you want to work with now that you are a dad and you're in a marriage and you have this family life that seems to be really good? Does that factor into how you're choosing your projects?
I think it's a bonus to be able to make stuff that that my friends' kids, my best friend Len, he has two little boys who are 4 and 5, and I'm like hyping up the show to them and being like, you're gonna love it. And I've done plenty of like, thrillers or dramas where I was like, you're gonna hate it. Like, this is not for you. So it's a bonus, and I think I just with age comes a little bit of reconciling what your talents are, what you're good at. And I feel like I live in this world comfortably. And when I finished Drake and Josh, I was really eager to try something else and stretch in that way. And then over time, I found myself coming back to the family stuff, but I was like, I wanted it to be a little different and a little higher level. And so this was the perfect sort of melding of that.
So as you're in the Drake and Josh world, obviously that's an all-encompassing world. You're filming all day. You're probably having to go to school, however it is. How do you work on the craft? I've always wondered this. Are you taking acting classes? How do you continue to develop as a young kid to try to really learn the craft while you're actually working?
I went I went to my first acting class with a guy named Andrew McGarrian, who's sort of like a famous young, he teaches all ages, but he's famous when it comes to kids. And I was in an acting class at 14 with me, Evan Peters, Evan Rachel Wood, Mae Whitman, trying to think, Penn Badgley. And it was just like, we were all the same age. We were all the same class. We all loved acting. And I would like watch these kids and be like, oh my God, like they're so good. I have to up my game. And that's where we fell in love with acting. I went there every week for 5 years. And then I sort of took a break and went to different classes. And over the last 3 years, I started studying with a woman named Sharon Chatton, and again, fell in love with the craft. Like, acting's so weird because it's like an alchemy when it's right. Like when it's good, you're like, it's hard to point to exactly like, how is it so good? It almost seems like it just comes out of the person. But when you really go to class and get down to the basics, it's like anything else. It's like the people who are great at it are doing the work to be great. And so for me, it's a constant thing. Like I just hate the feeling of getting rusty and feeling like I haven't acted in a while. I'm not prepared.
It's funny you mentioned that. I describe interviewing exactly the same way. It is, I call it the matrix. When you're in the matrix and the formula is connecting between me and talent, and you're bouncing and you can just feel how conversational it is, it's a magic. It's for lack of a better word, it's almost like sexual to a certain degree, because you're in this incredible euphoria, this moment where you're like, man, I don't feel like anyone else could be doing this better than me at this moment and making this person feel the way they're feeling. So I totally get everything you're saying. It's a magic that you can't describe to other people.
Did you learn by doing, or did you go to school for broadcasting, or both?
Dude, I was a financial advisor for a decade, sold my company at 30, and was like, what's this?
Did you go to Temple in Philly?
I did.
Okay.
And I was like, let me try this. And it was a lot of good decisions, bad decisions. And then I realized I really loved interviewing people, and literally started in Philly doing it on little phones. And it's been 13 years, and we built up to now where I host multiple TV shows, digital series. But, it's a grind. I always tell people, you have to learn to love no. But then now I get to speak to people like you every day, and it's fucking awesome, man. But it's magic. I always tell people, it's like in the Kaminsky method. When you watch and you're just like, there's a magic that happens. Unless you're an artist, I don't feel like people can really, an accountant can't necessarily always understand what we're talking about here.
I know. I think that I know what you mean. I was funny. I was looking at your Instagram and seeing like you interviewing Kevin O'Leary and Paige Van Zandt, and to be able to have access to such a tableau of people. What could be better than that? Is just talking to exceptional people and learning their methods.
Yeah, and by the way, there's a common thread that you find, which is everybody's relentless, and everybody, there's a drive to make it in whatever you want to be in, which is what you've obviously had. Because what people don't understand is this shit doesn't happen by accident for you. You are going to acting classes. You're probably going on a million auditions. Even with rapid success in the beginning, you're now just another actor in Hollywood who's still got to make it. So people don't get that. The world that were there ever moments for you, by the way, Josh, where you thought it's over? Are you like, this is over? It's come to an end?
Oh my God, I'm sure, call me next week and I'll be like, yeah, absolutely. And I think there are naturally those moments, and it's funny. I did a podcast for a while, and I got to interview people like Damon John and Gary Vaynerchuk, and like these really accomplished entrepreneurs. And what I found fascinating was I asked them, how long do you lick your wounds after a failure? Like, how long do you sort of stew in it and allow yourself to feel bad? And I think Gary V said minutes. Like, I just think the difference between them, to your point, and you said it so well, is like they move on from any failure so quickly. And whatever that was, it was getting them closer to a yes, right? It needed to be like, as long as your no's and the things that don't work out, the rejections, are all building and revealing to you, getting you closer to the right thing, then I just think you're in the right place. But of course, I mean, I don't know any artist, unless you're, DiCaprio and you've been famous since you were 18, like where you're not staring yourself in the mirror saying like, did I do the right thing? And is it too late for me to get my real estate license?
By the way, was there a role that you were up for, and you don't necessarily have to say the exact role, but you thought you were going to get, and you were like this close and it didn't happen? It was heartbreaking for you because it went on to become some kind of magical role in an iconic project?
Yeah, I was up for a role where the guy beat me out for the role, and he's a really good dude and he deserves it. And then he won an Emmy and then an Academy Award.
No way.
Yeah, it was like he was so perfect for the part, and it wasn't for me, but it felt like it was for me right until it wasn't my part anymore.
I had Michael Rappaport on the show last week.
Mike, he's the best.
The best. We were laughing, but he was talking about how he pretty much, with Quentin Tarantino and Inglourious Bastards, Eli Roth ended up in there. And he's like, I would have crushed that. And he's like, I can't believe he gave it to Eli Roth. And I was dying because you could see there was still a pain around it. And I was like, man, this guy's he has such reverence for Tarantino, as everybody does. Obviously, dude's a genius. But like, it was like you could just feel the pain coming out of him. And here he is, like a 40 or 50 something actor, and it's like still bugging him. It was great.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm sure that drives him. I mean, and it's like that great doc that they did on Michael Jordan last year. It's like, and I'm not going to phrase it correctly, but he was like, at a certain point, it became personal. Like, yeah, man, sometimes pettiness works when you want to be great. Sometimes you want to beat everyone.
On the flip side, was there a role? And I always love these stories where an actor will come in and they're like, this is a throwaway audition. I'm going to just fuck it up. And then they end up getting the role. Was there that moment for you where you're like, no chance I'm getting this, and then you get it?
Probably not. But like similarly, I remember, when I did the show with John Stamos, like, I just was like, I'm going to play John Stamos' son. Like, I am not the right guy for this. Like, I'm an okay looking person for an average human, but John Stamos, we're talking about like a Greek god here. And I remember a buddy of mine, a great actor named James Ransone, was helping me, prepare for the part. He's like, you could totally do this and do every step. And it was like an audition and a callback, and then you screen test, and it's like, and you're doing multiple screen tests. and you're watching guys fall out, every time you go back in. It's like there's 4 guys in the waiting room, then 3, then 2. And you get the call finally when you're I remember I auditioned in front of 15 network executives in a dark theater with John. And I'm like, oh my God. And by this point, you're so invested. You literally signed a contract that has basically, you have the role unless they say you're not the guy. And you're like, I can't believe I'm going to make so much money. I'm going to buy a house. But you don't have the role yet. They just want to make sure that you can't back out if they do give you the role. And I'm walking in my car and I see on my phone a number I don't recognize. And I was like, oh my God, I got the part. And I just picked up the call and I just hear everyone screaming congratulations on the other end. And it's like, it's like gambling addicts. Like gambling addicts tend to only remember the losses. It's not about the big win, right? Because there's always, the big win is 1 in 10, right? But for the most part, you're losing. It's kind of that as an actor. Like you live for the 10%, you live for the one time that you do get it, because there's so much rejection.
I wanted to ask you, because we're both white Jewish guys, but we just celebrated the 30-year anniversary of Boys in the Hood. I don't care if you're white Jew or anything else. That movie meant so much to so many people. Do you remember where you were when you may have first seen that movie and the impact it had on you? Because I do, and it's still one of my all-time favorites.
I think I remember seeing it. I mean, honestly, I probably watched it for the first time at 13 or 14 on one of the movie channels. But I mean, Lawrence Fishburne is in one of my favorite movies, Searching for Bobby Fischer. So I was already a massive fan. And just him and Cuba and Ice Cube and was it John Singleton's first movie?
Youngest director to ever be nominated for an Oscar.
I mean, what a master. Like that movie. And I don't know, and I can only speak to my own experience, but it just seemed like growing up in the 90s in New York City, there was like this, being a young Jewish kid, there was this embrace of hip hop culture and the way that it was like emerging in this once in a lifetime thing. Like it just felt like there was this kismet sort of, it just was like this marriage. And so movies like that, Juice, with Tupac and like, I mean, yeah, it meant a lot to me.
It made us feel cool, by the way. And I was talking to somebody about that. We felt like we were in that world, even though we weren't. And I remember Menace to Society and Juice, and I was like dressing like Tupac. And I'm like the last guy who should do it. But it was like, it just made you feel like you were part of that world. And you're right. Then the Beastie Boys, there was a whole revolution. Then Biggie and Jay and all of them. And it was a connection unlike anything. You can never describe to kids today. Maybe I sound like an old man, but what we experienced at that time was so different in my mind.
It's great, and he's not Jewish, he's Italian, but when you watch that great doc with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, and just kind of like, or like, what Leor Cohen did at Def Jam and Rick Rubin and people like this, it just was like, people from very different backgrounds and upbringings, and yet it was like this harmony where they came together and made this incredible thing.
So the main reason I started the show, Josh, was to talk to successful people in all genres about the mentality and the principles that help make them successful. How do you continue to elevate in your life and raise the standards?
I mean, I love the quote, my friend Ryan Holiday, who has written books like Ego is the Enemy and The Obstacle is the Way. He's a genius writer. And he always says your character is your fate. And I really believe that. And it takes a lot of the questioning out of like the small day-to-day exchanges, the microtransactions of life. Like I just have a certain work ethic, a certain level of moral responsibility that feels right in my book. And as long as I stick to that and I'm doing things that I feel that I can be proud of. And also I've been lucky enough to surround myself with apostles, be it my wife, my friends, my mom, people whose counsel means a lot to me, people who aren't afraid to hurt my feelings, to tell me the truth, and people who won't co-sign my BS. And I think that amalgamate is what's kept me on the right path.
Bro, this was so awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. Congratulations, Turner and Hooch on Disney Plus. I don't think you have to worry about a season 2, by the way. This thing's going multiple seasons. It's a franchise. People love this. You're going to be fine. So congratulations.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Arthur. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, same here, man. Good luck with everything. You're welcome back anytime, Josh. Thanks, brother.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Bye-bye.
Take care, man.